John Gray versus Steven Pinker. Engage! There were 0 wars between the United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers of the era, contrary to every expert prediction. No nuclear weapon has been used in war since Nagasaki, again confounding everyone's expectations. There have been no wars between any subset of the great powers since the end of the Korean War in 1953. There have been 0 wars between Western European countries. The extraordinary thing about this fact is how unextraordinary it sounds. In much the same way that rich societies exported their pollution to developing countries, the societies of the highly developed world exported their conflicts. They were at war with one another the entire time, not only in Indochina, but in other parts of Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. The Korean War, the Chinese invasion of Tibet, British counterinsurgency warfare in Malaya and Kenya, the abortive Franco-British invasion of Swiss, the Angolan Civil War, decades of civil war in the Congo and Guatemala, the Six-Day War, the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956 and of Czechoslovakia in 1968, the Iran-Iraq War, and the Soviet-Afghan War. When the end of the Cold War removed the Soviet Union from the scene, war did not end. It continued in the First Gulf War, the Balkan Wars, Chechnya, the Iraq War, and in Afghanistan and Kashmir, among other conflicts. Taken together, these conflicts add up to a formidable sum of violence. For Pinker, they are minor, peripheral, and hardly worth mentioning. The reason so many violent institutions succumbed within so short a span of time was that the arguments that slew them belonged to a coherent philosophy that emerged during the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment. The ideas of thinkers like Hobbes, Spinoza, Descartes, Locke, David Hume, Mary Astle, Kant, Beccaria, Smith, Mayle, Wollstone, Kraft, Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton, and John Stuart Mill coalesced into a worldview that we can call Enlightenment humanism. These are highly disparate thinkers, and it is far from clear that any coherent philosophy could have coalesced from their often incompatible ideas. The difficulty would be magnified if Pinker included Marx, Bakunin, and Lenin, who undeniably belong within the extended family of intellectual movements that comprise the Enlightenment, but are left off the list. Like other latter-day partisans of Enlightenment values, Pinker prefers to ignore the fact that many Enlightenment thinkers have been doctrinally anti-liberal, while quite a few have favored the large-scale use of political violence, from the Jacobins who insisted on the necessity of terror during the French Revolution to Engels, who welcomed a world war in which the Slavs, aborigines in the heart of Europe, would be wiped out. We recall that Pinker achieved notoriety through his attempts to reinstate the idea that the human mind is fixed and limited. His bestseller, The Blank Slate, The Modern Denial of Human Nature, 2002, an assault on the idea that human behavior is indefinitely malleable, was controversial for several reasons, not least for its attack on the belief that pre-agricultural cultures were inherently peaceable. The book provoked a storm of criticism from liberal humanists who sensed, rightly, that this emphasis on the constancy of human nature limited the scope of future human advance. Pinker seems to have come to share this anxiety, and the present volume is the result. The decline of violence posited in The Better Angels of Our Nature is a progressive transformation of precisely the kind his earlier books seemed to preclude, but the contradiction in which Pinker is stuck is not his alone. It afflicts anyone who tries to combine rigorous Darwinism with a belief in moral progress. Darwinism is unlikely to be the last word on evolution, but if Darwin's theory is even approximately right, there can be no rational basis for expecting revolutionary change in human behavior. Some of the impulses we inherit from our evolutionary past may incline us to conflict, but others, the better angel of our nature, as Abraham Lincoln called them, incline us to peaceful cooperation. In order to show that conflicts between the two will in future increasingly be settled in favor of peace, Pinker needs to be able to identify some very powerful trends. He does his best, but the changes to which he points, the spread of democracy and the increase of wealth, for example, are more problematic than he realizes. The formation of democratic nation-states was one of the principal drivers of violence of the last century, involving ethnic cleansing in interwar Europe, post-colonial states and the post-communist Balkans. Steadily growing prosperity may act as a kind of tranquilizer, but there is no reason to think the increase of wealth can go on indefinitely, and when it falters, violence will surely return. In quite different ways, attacks on minorities and immigrants by neo-fascists in Europe, the popular demonstrations against austerity in Greece and the English riots of the past summer show the disruptive and dangerous impact of sudden economic slowdown on social peace. All the trends that supposedly lie behind the long peace are contingent and reversible. Pinker's attempt to ground the hope of peace in science is profoundly instructive, for it testifies to our enduring need for faith. We don't need science to tell us that humans are violent animals. History and contemporary experience provide more than sufficient evidence. For liberal humanists, the role of science is, in effect, to explain away this evidence. They look to science to show that over the long run violence will decline, hence the panoply of statistics and graphs and the resolute avoidance of inconvenient facts. The result is no more credible than the efforts of Marxists to show the scientific necessity of socialism, or free market economists to demonstrate the permanence of what was, until quite recently, hailed as the long boom. The long peace is just another such delusion, and just as ephemeral. It's a fair cop, Gov.